Okay, welcome everybody. We're so excited to have you here with the Riverdale Minyan via Zoom. One day hope to be able to do some of these in person, but we really have a treat for everybody this evening. A big yasher koach and thank you to Sam Koenig and the entire Adult Education Committee, who's just once again helped us put together just an outstanding program and an incredible speaker, and we're really in for a treat tonight. Tonight we're gonna have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Noam Wasserman, who's the dean at YU's Sims School of Business. And not only is he an accomplished author, former professor at Harvard Business School for over a decade, he's a real mensch, a real scholar, and has taken time out of his incredibly busy schedule to be with us this evening. And for those of you who didn't hear, he's making a wedding actually in just a little over a week and a half. So big mazel tov to you, Dr. Wasserman, and your whole family. And it says a lot that you would be able to take time like that with us here. And so we appreciate that even more given the context, and are so excited to learn from someone with your incredible experience, both in terms of your work at Sims, but also in the many years you had teaching and working in these different fields. And so without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Wasserman. And before he begins, just a reminder, if you have questions or comments, feel free to add them in the chat, and then we'll address them at the end.
Okay, thank you so much, Rabbi Lehrfield. Bichod Arav. Thank you everyone for coming. Also, thank you first to Rachel for reeling me in, for asking, and then also to Sam for making the trains run on time with this. This is Yirtzeh Hashem for a schus, for a refuah shlema for 3 people: Rachel Malka bat Sertel Shendel, also for Dov Bear bat Etta, and for Ephraim ben Malka. So hopefully a schus of our coming together. It's not going to be purely Torah learning. That's you'll see a little bit of the Torah business part of what we're going to get into. But hopefully in the schus for them that they'll be able to join us maybe for a future one if it can be in person, as Halavai will be able to do sometime soon. So let's go dive in and start taking a look big picture of what we're going to try to accomplish today. What we're going to do is bring together 2 domains that usually aren't brought together. First off, business, or in particular entrepreneurship. Then also merging that with the Torah sides of us. And so in some ways, a classic Torah Umado or Torah business approach, where hopefully we'll get insights from each one of the sides that will shine a light and give us deeper nuances about the other side. And so we'll move a little bit back and forth between the 2 and see how we might be able to have a richer set of lenses on the things that we're going to be taking a look at. The founding with family. We're going to talk about founding a nation, our nation, but also founding startups, and see what the lessons that can be learned from each of those sides are. And so first off, let's also, everyone, if you are in a quiet place, please go right ahead and unmute yourselves. The last slide that I used to put up when I was teaching at Harvard was the quote from Rabbi Hanina of thanking his Talmidim for teaching him, essentially saying that I've learned from my Rebbeim a little bit more from my peers and the most from my Talmidim. I've learned very much so that when I'm talking, I don't learn. And so hopefully we'll be able to make this more interactive and be able to involve you and key pieces along the way. So thank you, Mr. Jesselson and others who have unmuted, and hopefully we'll be able to involve you in a bunch of the Shachla Vitaria that we'll have now. So first off, bunch of people that we got to know pretty well over the last couple of months. Anyone see any problems with these duos? What's the inherent pattern that we see across these? How well did these family members do? How well did these relatives do?
Conflict.
What was that?
Conflict.
Lots of conflict, lots of tension. The last thing that you would think from family members, you would think that it's going to be kumbaya, that it's going to be everyone getting along well with those who are nearest and closest to them. However, a recurring theme in Sefer Bereshis is having those tensions and the conflict between them. Well, a lot of times brothers, but also other types of people. We have the sisters. We have also husbands and wives and things like that. Let's go and take a look at a couple of things that across the rest of the Torah that we see some cautions about when it comes to relatives. And we're going to get a little bit more deeply into what we can see about some of the root causes of why there would be conflict among relatives, and also some of the solutions that we'll be able to see, how you might be able to avoid some of those tensions. And so this is going now to Devarim. This is the first paragraph of Devarim. When it's talking about when you're having a court case And an interesting thing that it's highlighting when you're going to be having the Shoftim be ruling in a court case, that to the extent that we have the highlighting that they have of what type of issues and what types of people that would come up between them, we have here bein ish ubein achiv, between a person and between his brother, as being a classic court case that is that the Shoftim are being warned about. Why would they be warned about it? This is what Rashi highlights for us in his Davar Acher. Afal iske dira bein chalukat achim, brothers who are sharing an apartment or sharing some kind of a property, and they are wrestling over the tanur and the kirayim. They're wrestling over the stove and the kettle, the two different things, and how to be able to split it. Some things that we'll see echoes of when we're taking a look at some of the conflict between family members, how to split the ownership in a venture, how to be able to split the roles or the titles and other things like that. Here, Rashi and Chazal are going and giving us a heads up that actually when you're looking at a case that's going to have conflict and tensions, a prototypical version of that is when you have brothers who are wrestling over how to be able to split that kind of an estate or the property that they are dealing with. We can see a little bit of echoes from Rabbi Sachs Zatzal, some of the things that he talks about across Bereshis, highlighting the 15 times in Sefer Bereshis that Ahava, love, is mentioned every time it generates conflict. So trying to understand what is the deeper underlying elements of why that conflict exists, what are the ways in which family members might be more inherently heading towards that, is some of the things that we're going to wrestle with now to be able to understand it. The lens that we'll get in terms of first being able to see that is going to be where I spent my life for almost 20 years, studying founders, studying startups, and a lot of the tensions and the issues that arose between them. And so let's go and put a pause right now on the Torah side and head a little bit to the Mada side. And then after we do that, we'll head into a little bit of the U part of it, Torah Mada, being able to see the connections between the two of those. And so let's go and paint first the picture of when you have a founding team coming together. People are trying to start a venture. They're trying to pursue opportunity together. First, there's the person who came up with the idea. The light bulb went off and he decided to go and make this into an endeavor that's going to devote the life to. Key fork in the road when you're taking a look at the people that you're going to involve in the venture. What do we think that this option might be for someone who came up with an idea? Any guesses about what this fork in the road and what this option might be? What would this Superman, Hillel, go ahead.
Lex Luthor?
Okay, interesting. That might be the evil investor that they have the other side of the table from you. Okay, but Superman taking the weight of the world on his or her own broad shoulders to try to leap that building of opportunity in a single bound. This is the solo founder. This is the person who's going to go and do it all by himself or herself. Very different option compared to going down the bottom path. There, you're going to inject in at least one co-founder, at least one other person who's going to help you. And we're going to take very briefly a look at the three biggest issues that those co-founding teams, those people are coming together to do this together, that they tend to falter on. The decisions that they make that tend to come back to haunt them when it comes to involving those people. We're going to call these the 3 R's. And the first of these is going to be the one that's the most shayach to the things that we're taking a look at tonight. First of the R's is the relationships that you tap. Are you going to be founding with those who are near and dear to you, or are you going to be tapping some other types of people? This is the one that we're going to go the deepest into. Also see a little bit of data, see some patterns that emerge from that, and then apply that to the relationships that we were taking a look at in Bereshis, and then also to one type of relationship that we see in Sefer Shmos that we're wading into, being able to get to know the key players and see what kinds of things they do together. It's going to be a contrast that we're going to see in Shmos compared to what we saw in Bereshis. So first off, there's the relationships. Second of the R's is the roles and decision-making. When you're going and deciding who's going to be the CEO, how are we going to make collective decisions together? There's going to be decisions by consensus or not. This is where the natural things that teams tend to glom onto as their solutions to these issues tend to be the most ill-fated. And that's what we're going to see is going to be a recurring pattern in the things that we're looking at. So those are the first of the 2 R's, the relationships and the roles and decision-making. Third one is the rewards that we already foreshadowed a little bit with the Tanur and the Kirayim, the brothers who are splitting ownership of those 2 different pieces that might be coming with the estate. And so we're going to focus again on the first of these, the relationships part of it. But a recurring theme across all of them is what we might call the tension between head and heart. This is one thing that dear departed Steve Jobs, alav shalom. For me, the favorite quote from Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, was that founders should follow their heart, but check it with their head. And a lot of times when founders are making gut level instinctual decisions, that they have to know when to pull back on the reins and not default to what seems like the right thing to do. And instead to inject in a little bit of thought, a little bit of rational thinking. And that's the head that is hopefully going to be checking the heart. However, when founders don't do that, that's when it gets it into trouble. And especially when it comes to the 3 R's that we've been going and taking a look at. So let's take a look at some of the choices within that, some of the prototypical options within there. First off, there's founding with friends, those who you know socially, those who are the ones who we are close to when it comes to the social relationships that we've come together. What's even more extreme than founding with friends when it comes to the social relationships? Does anyone get worried? Hello, go ahead.
Family?
Okay, family members, in particular, what we might call the couplepreneurs, the two significant others that are coming together to do some things together. Those who know each other presumably really well, that they're coming together to be this iconic team. Steve Jobs in particular, when he came together with his best friend, he said, what could be better than founding with your best friend? And it was downhill from there in terms of the issues that he faced with Steve Wozniak and the ways in which there were major tensions that they had within the venture. But this is the founding with those that you know socially, that you have all sorts of ways that you know them already. We're going to take a look at some of the limitations of that. But that's a very different type of relationship than when you're being brought together professionally. When you have, for instance, this is the dream team that we might refer to it as. You have the making the team by checklist or designing it by algorithm. So we have someone who can shoot the ball. Now we need someone who can go and bring it up the court. Now we need someone really big to rebound under the basket. So checking off each of those pieces, bringing them together professionally, where it's not the social that they knew each other already. They might become close once they are professionally brought together, but otherwise a very different starting point when it comes to the things that are going to be bringing them together. So let's take a look from a data perspective at these types of teams. Okay, this is going to be the most cryptic of the slides that we're going to see tonight. Let me walk you through a little bit of the data. Some of the people who are involved in healthcare might be familiar with Kaplan-Meier plots and these things like that, that help us be able to see the transitions over time between different things. Let me walk you through what this is. So on the bottom axis, this is the venture aging. So you start all the way at the left. 0 is when it is founded, when the startup is founded. And then as things play out, as we move across to the right, that is as the venture is aging and presumably growing, going through all sorts of forks along the road. In the vertical axis here, that is the percentage of the founders who are still fully on board in the venture. So we have at the top left there at founding that every one of the co-founders is still on board in the team. But as things play out, as we move to the right, and as things are happening within the venture, as founders leave, that's when we start heading downwards, as we have lower and lower amounts of the founders that are there on the team. And if you take a look at the arrow that we have on the right side here, the more stable the team, the higher up on the graph you're going to be. And as you're heading downwards, the less stable and the flip side of it that you're going to be. So we have 2 lines here, 2 types of teams. And we're talking about a third line that just keep things simple. It's a critical line to also be able to think about. But these 2 lines on here, one of them is the people who founded with friends. And the other line is the other teams. Which one do you think is the founded with friends? And so just to highlight first, one of the key patterns is that there's a honeymoon period for the 2 teams. Like they're relatively synonymous during the early days of the startup. However, there's a dramatic divergence once we hit a certain point. There's a very significant difference between these 2 lines. Which of these 2 teams?
Not family.
The higher one is the not family, is the,
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
the family
Higher
and
one
friends
is
would be the more stable. Is that what you're saying?
no, the less stable.
No,
Okay.
the opposite.
Okay,
The
so
less
less stable is going to be the friends and family, the people you know better, the people who you are very close with already. Why would that be less stable?
Because it's a problem of emotional, a lot of emotion.
Okay, so you're talking about, I think, the mix of the personal and the professional. When you're making professional decisions, maybe less emotion involved. When you have the personal, then emotion might be clouding it. And especially when you have a conflict between the personal and the professional, which are you likely to pick? The thing that's better for the personal or the thing that's better for the professional?
Professional.
That is, so when there's a conflict, you're going to choose the venture over the best friend, over the brother.
Yes.
Okay, it's interesting. So the way in which you can think about that, you're going to be imperiling that personal relationship, because what's better for the venture is that you err on the side, that you decide on the side of what's better for the startup. So that's an interesting outcome that we might have in terms of where that kind of team might go. Anyone want to push back or have other pieces that they would add to why the friends and family team would be less stable?
It's a family.
Okay, any other factors that we would highlight? Or did Mr. Saban nail it?
Thank you.
Okay, let me push back a little bit. Just on the,
Doesn't family dynamics change over time?
okay, in what way?
Best friends may become less best friends, shall we say? People may have divergent opinions.
Okay, so when there are the divergence opinions, then those tensions would lead the best friends to be harming a little bit of the relationship. Okay, so one of the key factors that we're going to be taking a look at, and you guys have both highlighted so the two key factors that we're going to be having about the tension between the personal and the professional, and what happens when one goes sour, in particular when something in the venture goes sour and we're fighting over it. What is the damage to the personal relationship going to be from that? So those are going to be two of the factors that we're going to take a look at. Does anyone say that it's going to be the opposite, that it's going to be the friends and family, the people you know well, the people you trust already, that's going to be more stable? Or do we have a consensus around this? Okay, it looks like we have consensus. So on this one, this is actually going to be where the data validates what that inclination is. The friends teams are less stable than the other teams that we have here. The striking thing for me isn't necessarily that. It's going to be the next slide that we're going to take a look at. If it is less stable and everyone agrees on it, which do you think is the most common of the types of founding teams that we have? Do you think it's going to be the not friends, or do you think it's going to be the friends?
Probably the friends, yeah.
Okay, so that's going to be one of the key cautions that we're going to have with head and heart. And well, let's fast forward just a drip to that data for us to be able to see it. This is, let me give you a little idea where the data is coming from. This is coming from high tech and life sciences startups. So the most professionalized of startups, if you will, compared to family business, small business, and things like that. It's where you would least expect to see friends and family teams that are going to be in the co-founder profile. However, even there within these teams, more than half of them co-found with the friends and family, that there seems to be very much an accepted wisdom among us and really in general population, that is the most ill-fated, the most dangerous of the teams to do. And so the first of the things is the combination between these two slides. When we are following our heart, the decisions that we tend to make are often the most ill-fated. We tend to found with friends and family, and we tend to create the least stable teams because of that. The second factor that I was talking about that came out of those analyses, the line that's missing on that chart, just to keep it a little bit simpler, if we were to compare that least stable of teams, the friends and family types of teams, with stranger teams, people you don't know or acquaintances, people that are you barely know, which of those do you think is going to be more stable? Those you know really well versus the people you don't know almost at all. Which of those do you think is going to be more stable if we were to have a similar chart for those?
The people you don't know.
Okay, the people that are you're completely starting on from scratch.
I
Why would
think
that
it-
be?
Oh, sorry.
No,
Bradley,
Because what brought you together is the only thing that put you together is to found the company or to found the venture. Whereas family and friends have other relationships. So if you didn't know anybody before and you put all your efforts into making a joint venture, this has more of a, in my opinion,
And you know if you're.
possibility of succeeding than starting with friends or family.
Okay, so that sounds like the friends and family is going to have some baggage that the prior relationship is going to introduce, that the people starting over from scratch, that they're starting as strangers or acquaintances,
Correct.
don't have to undo that baggage. They're starting from ground zero, but that the friends and family are starting from negative territory and have to work to get to ground zero. That's one of our core hypotheses that we have about what the result was, that the strangers teams were more stable than the friends and families teams. That to me was the most thought-provoking of all the things that we found when it comes to that. And we're going to see some echoes of that when we get a little bit further into it and take a look at Sefer Shmos and some of the counter examples that we have about the friends and family teams that we're going to see coming together. Okay, but those are, you've already highlighted several of the key factors that we're going to be taking a look at. A key one of the problems that we face is also hinted at when you head into founding with friends and family, as we talked about also with Steve Jobs and his best friend. What could be better than doing that? We think everything's going to be rosy. We think that this is going to be all sorts of glorious kind of founding team dynamics that we're going to have with the people that we know closest to us. And unfortunately, that's even more of a crushing blow to us when it turns out to be a whole bunch of tension with the people that we know so well. We made some bold assumptions about our getting along, and it turns out that that's crushed. When you're founding with people that you don't really know, you're expecting some dynamics that are going to be problematic. You have to work through a whole bunch of the relationship issues. When you're heading into the other type, it's going to be very much a negative surprise for you when you have all of those kind of tensions. Let's just get into one of the other things in terms of a lens on this. That's also another one of those factors in terms of how well you know the people who you interact with socially. I don't know if anyone here ever brought your kids to work when it was take your daughters to work day, or if anyone was a kid going to work with your parents. Did anyone do that? Anyone try that out?
Yes,
Okay, what was the experience like?
very good. But the kids were very small.
Okay. Okay, what would you, anyone who went as the kid and saw their parents at work?
Yes,
Okay, which parent did you go with?
well, I'm from the older generation. In my time, only the fathers worked. The mothers
Okay.
were home. So I went.
So
with
when
the
you
father.
went, when you went with dad to work, was dad the same at work as he was at home?
Well, the truth is, I wasn't with him in the same room. I was doing, they asked me to do some menial work or something. He was a director of a bank, so he sat in his own room and he saw his clients. I wasn't there when he did that.
Okay. No, it's very interesting. That's actually going to be one of the things we're going to get into as a best practice because of some of these problems. So that's very interesting that dad went ahead and did that. Anyone else who went with their parent to work and observed, were they the same or were they different from what they were at home? When I would ask my students in the classroom about it, a lot of them would have gone to work with the parent. And typically it was a completely different person than what they saw at home. That the context is critical. The being in a very different place with a different set of relationships and things like that. They didn't recognize their parent when they were at work. And yet we make the bold assumption that when we know someone socially, that it's going to be the same relationship when we port it into the workplace. When we go and found with someone, it's going to be very similar to the things that we've experienced with them throughout life. And so it's another one of those surprises that we can highlight. Ashley was searching for an image around it. This is a newscaster who brought her kids to work one day. And be kind of to be able to interview those three daughters about what mom was like on the set would be very interesting to be able to have the equivalent of what I'm able to get at with my students when they're talking about those experiences when we're in the classroom there. So let's go and crystallize some of these patterns when it comes to the things that we've been talking about. Let's go and architect, array these people that we have, these types of relationships across the top here. Friends and family, the thing that's most of interest to us, all the way at the left here. And let's take a look at two of the factors, one of which we've delved into, and the other one we've hinted at a little bit. The first of them is going to be the one where we'll deepen it. We'll add this factor here and consider it a little bit. How well do you talk about sensitive issues with those who are close to you? The elephants in the room. Is this going to be the same across these different type of relationships? What is it going to look like across these?
I think it depends on the elephant in the room sometimes who sometimes you actually talk about things with a work colleague because it's something that you don't want to talk to your spouse about or something like that, just because you need like the third party opinion. But I would imagine if there's things that are related to working together as a family, you might want to just keep that inside and not talk to a colleague about that.
Okay.
There's challenges in both directions.
Okay, it's interesting. You're talking about there are issues that you're more comfortable talking about with a non-family colleague, the people that we have all the way on the right here, compared to talking about it with a family colleague, if you will.
Yes, it depends what the issue is. If it's
Exactly.
completely business related, I think you would be more comfortable talking to your coworkers than to your spouse. If it's
Okay.
strict business, you don't want the intervention from the spouse. You want to make your business decision with your coworkers or with the people in the same company. So
Okay.
it's a very misleading question because the elephant can be anything. So
Okay,
you
but
don't
here we're
know
talking
what
about-
the elephant is.
Here we're talking about the issues that would be the ones in the startup that you're going to have to grapple with. So
There
for
is
instance, when we're trying to go and split the roles in decision-making, when we're trying to split the
Another
ownership.
factor here, there's another factor in this kind of question, timing. How many years you're in the business? If it's initial beginning, or 20 years, 30 years, then the elephant has a different aspect.
Okay, so we're talking about the founding stage at the beginning when they're coming together as a team.
The beginning should, okay, the elephant should be out.
Just to complicate that timing piece a little bit and to add another factor, I think the timing also, and along with trust, has a lot to do with the relationship going in and then the relationship through the venture, right? Like when you think about these different axes, the family and friends exist on the time axes prior to the venture, throughout the venture, and then hopefully after the venture as well, right? Whereas acquaintances and coworkers are not there as much. Similarly to the question that we were discussing before in terms of like, you know, people who will start up companies with friends or family versus, you know, random people, that trust piece is huge in the early stages of the venture. So starting a venture with someone that you don't know might be something that might be a huge barrier in terms of knowing what their level of investment or commitment is versus with friends and family where you might be able to, whether that would be considered an elephant or not, I don't know, but you're able to kind of go in with more trust and more of a mutual sense of purpose in those early stages, even though there's the risk of that distance as time goes on. So I think like the trust, the nature of the relationship, and also the timing, like I said, before, during, and after the business venture has a huge impact on the nature of all these relationships.
Okay, so no, Bradley, absolutely. Or the trust issue, great one that you're raising. Let's stick with this for a little while. Let's stick with you, Bradley, in terms of the trust one. So you were just using trust in two contexts, and it makes perfect sense the way the English language works. Trusting your friends and family, trusting your best friend per se, versus trusting your coworkers. Is that the same thing?
It would depend. I think going back to what Aryeh and Elisa were saying in terms of the elephant, it would depend, right? It depends on the scenario. It would depend on what you're trusting them with, right? Are you trusting them to have your best interest or the venture's best interest? Like what is? It depends on what the nature of that trust would be.
Okay, great. So
what the direction of the trust is.
Yeah, so let's stick with that in terms of when you say that you trust your best friend. What does that mean? What are you saying about that relationship?
That's a relationship that I feel able to be invested, vulnerable, that there's a mutuality and a dual, like a two-way street, along with like kind of a direction and a sense of growth in that relationship.
Okay, so essentially that person is going to have my back. They're going to be looking out for my interests and things like that. Is that what you were saying from both before and now?
And that I would have theirs, and that we're kind of in it together to, you know, in our mutual interest as well.
Okay, so when you say that you trust a coworker, what are you saying there?
I mean, it would be similar, right? I would trust them to be, I guess the trust would be more about trusting them, I guess, to not betray me more often than not. So it's kind of more of the I guess the double negative side of the trust. and the trust that they would I think it would be similar in terms of maintaining that mutual respect and mutual kind of protection.
Okay. What do other people say in terms of when we say we trust a coworker? What are we saying about that person?
The coworker is usually when you trust a coworker, that's or any issues that apply to the business, to the interests of the business, but not your personal life so much. Whereas in a family setting, when you trust your spouse or your partner, it's you're on a same level and you mutually trust each other to do for you what you would do for them. A co-worker, you trust only in the sense that they both of you, if you trust them, want the best for the company. But everything else is being discussed.
Okay, well, you're talking about
Noam,
Yeah.
isn't it a little bit of, also, you're talking about founding. So it's not just a matter of trust. Family, if you're doing family, it's coming from one pocket. When you're talking about coworkers and co-founders, two of you have a mutual interest of, I mean, everyone doesn't want to lose money, but the point is that you're putting everything into it and you're really going to try to bolster each other up to make sure that it works.
Okay, so you're heightening even more so the question. There was the consensus that everyone had that the family teams are going to be worse off when it comes to the stability, when it comes to things blowing up and other things like that. And so we have all of these things that should be working in the direction of the favor of those teams. And yet, despite that, we have challenges that they face that lead to those teams being the least stable of the ones that we're taking a look at here. Now, the typical thing that when I ask people, what are you saying that you trust a coworker, they talk a lot more about competence and skills. Closer to what Aryeh was talking about, when they face business issues, are they going to be able to solve them? Are they going to have the competence to do that versus when you trust a family member, that they're going to have my back, when you trust a best friend and things like that? Are those the same thing? Those are very different things. And yet we make the bold assumption when we head into co-founding with friends and family that the trust that we have in the getting my back is going to be the same thing of being able to trust their capabilities as a coworker. And it also leads to all sorts of challenges when we have, and it turns out that the person that I thought I trusted to scale with the venture, to have the skills that are going to come through as the person who's playing a key role within the venture, turns out that they're not doing it well. That's going to be a major elephant in the room that you're going to be very, very resistant to acknowledge to begin with, let alone discuss. And those are just some of the things that are going to be some of the tensions that are going to be introduced between the personal and the professional. Just to go and capture a little bit in terms of the likelihood of discussing the elephants in the room. Who looks forward to having tension-filled discussions with a family member? People like doing that? Do we seek those tension-filled discussions? At least I don't. There's very much a general human instinct to avoid bringing up those elephants in the room with the people we're close to, compared to when we know we don't know each other, we might be much more open to bringing up those types of things. How do I know that you're going to scale my acquaintance co-founder? How do I know, a bunch of other things that you're going to be dating before you go and marry them? And so other ways that you're going to have those discussions. If we're to go and plot the difference across these, the typical things that we find both in the research and also that people highlighting in terms of their instincts, it looks something like this, that you are least likely to discuss the elephants in the room with the people you are closest to, more with the people you don't know, and then possibly the most with the people you've already had to go through the trenches with. You've honed the difficult discussion skills with them, all sorts of ways that you're going to be better suited for those all the way on the right. But again, the thing that we're looking at the most is on the left here. Let's take a look at the second of the factors that you already brought up a little bit, the damage to the personal relationship if things go sour in the startup. Is this going to be the same across these types of relationships?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so what's this one to go look like? How's it going to differ across these three?
No, because if something blows up with a coworker or somebody is not part of your family, you walk away from it, or you have the possibility of walking away from it. If it's within your own family, it's very hard to walk away from it.
Okay, so the very high damage that we have all the way on the left here. And then going down in terms of the damage, if things blow up when you founded with an acquaintance, how many possible replacements are there for that acquaintance?
Quite a
7
few.
billion? Lots of them out there. If you co-found with mom and then things blow up, how easy is it to go and replace mom? The most cherished of our relationships, huge damage that we're causing when it comes to that. And so all sorts of things that are very much at risk for that. We can get into, we're not going to spend the time on it now, about how would the past coworker compare to the acquaintance. We'll put it somewhere like similar to it. It also tends to be a Rorschach test for how much people like their coworkers. Some people say that I wouldn't be devastated at all if it blew up with my coworkers. Okay, but the key thing for us again is all the way on the left. And this is one of the key findings that we have within founding teams, that when you are, and this is what we call playing with fire, when you go and co-found with the people who are closest to yourself, you are having all sorts of ways that you think this is going to forge a stronger team, that this is going to be the most glorious. But unfortunately, when you play with fire, it also increases the chances that things are going to blow up and you're going to get burned. And so a key thing that we have to now, we've diagnosed a little bit within the founding teams. What are the two of the biggest risks that you take when you are co-founding with the people all the way on the left here? We have the divergence between these two. There's a big gap between these two factors. And that's why there's so much fire all the way on the left there. Low chance that you're going to discuss the difficult issues. And if those come back to haunt you because things blow up because of them, you're going to have major damage. So that's that big gap that we have there on the left. Are there ways to reduce that gap? Like push up on the bottom, the chances you're going to discuss the elephants in the room, or on the top, you have to push down the damage if things go sour within the venture? Are there any ways that people can see like some solutions to these problems?
The
a
best
really
solution
good
we see by
therapist.
Avraham and Lot. When Avraham said, you go one way, I go the other way. That's the best solution.
Interesting. So the structural one you were highlighting with your father before, that he put me in a different office from him, not working directly for him,
Right.
while he's going off and doing other things. And so the structural solution of separation. Okay, great. Bradley, what were you saying before?
Is it having a really good therapist?
Okay, so injecting in
Particularly
a
a
third
family
party.
therapist. But yeah, having supports. But I actually, to Aryeh's point, I actually like the Rashi on that separation, right? That they're actually, the point is that there is separation of, if you're left, I'm right. If you're right, I'm left. However, either way, I'm right next to you, right? A recognition that you need the separation, but you also need that sameness of purpose in terms of, being always having each other's backs, even, and establishing kind of, roles and responsibilities and both the separation and also the proximity.
Okay, no, that's great. So that also would apply to Dad and Aryeh, the same purpose, but with having the wall between them, both figuratively and structure and literally. Okay, so that's great in terms of some of these solutions that we have to them. Let me give you one example of what you have been talking about with regards to that. Let me set this up just a drip. One of our courses that we have in our Masters of Real Estate, we had a guest. We have guests every week who come in to that course. It's called the Titans of Real Estate. There's an LA powerhouse in real estate named David Nagel. And David brought into the venture two of his nephews. This would seem to be playing with fire. David's going to talk about what he did. We're going to take a look just at this 2-minute clip about talking about his structural solution that has echoes, as Bradley was talking about, of several of the things that we see with Avraham and Lot and some of the other structural solutions that we might be able to see.
Wait, but of course, when you bring in family members, you got to be careful for politics. The more capable they are, the more politics potentially runs in. And so the way I handled it with my two nephews is I made sure they were focused on completely different domains. So I have one nephew who's focused on operations, the day in and day out engine of collecting rent, managing expenses, and ultimately creating distributions from our income to our investors. And then I have my other nephew, so that his name is Zev Nagel, and my other nephew, Daniel, he's focused on acquisitions, dispositions, and finance. So he's focused on capital transaction events, and the other one is focused on day-to-day. And that's how I've been able to do it. So two brothers that get along real well, but if they had tremendous overlap over each other, it would not go well. Because each one is capable, each one's capable to be a boss, each one's capable to be a director, a head of a department, and so they are. And my lesson to, or my advice would be to any other person who would be bringing family members into a business is you need to make sure that you have walls, clear walls or clear division walls of duties and responsibilities between family members and not have them overlap, because it's where they overlap that creates kind of an internal competition potentially between family members.
Okay. The importance when you're playing with fire of creating firewalls, including the structural ones that we've been talking about and that David was using within Decron, the company that he has. So let's start heading back to now the Torah side of what we're talking about and see some of these lenses on some of the dynamics that we're going to be taking a look at. First of these is going to be a founder, actually. So Rav Zlotowitz Zatzal, founder of ArtScroll. Very interesting thing in one of ArtScroll's weekly publications that focused on Rav Zlotowitz, talking about the mixing of the personal and the professional and how he resisted it. Often he was invited to join in business deals by donors and he rejected them flat. I have a mission in life, and if donors become business partners, they will see me differently. They're not going to see me in the same way as when I am having the other type of much cleaner relationship with them. And what happens if things fail? So we're talking about like if there's damage to the relationship, if the startup fails, our relationship will sour. So things that we see also echoed in from the talking about the founder of and then the words of Rav Zlotowitz. Okay, now let's go and head into now some of the origins of being able to see these echoes in Sefer Bereshis. And so starting off first here, when man was created, when Hashem is going and creating the Adam and Chava, and it talks about that the term la nefesh chaya. The interesting thing is the commentary taking off of the Targum that Rashi cites that this is understanding in speech. Hashem, what distinguishes us? That we can have difficult conversations, that there's all sorts of ways that we can use the power of speech to hopefully be more on the same page than the other chayos that are out there that are not going to be able to communicate. And unfortunately, we fail too often to live up to this ideal of being able to use the power of speech to be able to make things more effective in the world. And so if we take a look, for instance, let's head into husband and wife as an example, Rivka and Yaakov. Let's take a look at some of the dynamics between them and be able to see a little bit about some of the ways that they embody some of the cautionary pieces of what we're taking a look at. So we have Rivka when she was pregnant. She was having problems during the pregnancy. And so she wanted to go get some guidance about it. And what she was told is that you have two goyim you're pregnant with two of them. The two twins, they're going to have all sorts of issues, a lot of the ways in which there's going to be the divergences between them. First off, who did she go to be able to get that guidance? Did she go to her husband, the Gadol Ador? Did she go to Yitzchak Avinu to be able to find out what is going on with this? Please find out from Hashem what that is. Who did she go to instead? Okay, she went to go and ask Hashem, but she had an intermediary. She actually went to Shem. She went to go and consult Shem ben Noach to find out who that was. And an interesting thing is that the Netziv, the best picture I was able to find here of Natzali Tzvi here to Berlin, the Netziv Zatzal says that this was indicative of the communication problems that Rivka and Yaakov had. All the way from the beginning, we see when they were first, Rivka and Yitzchak, that yes, excellent. So thank you for catching that. That they from the beginning, when she was coming on the camel to come and see him, that she from the beginning was having all sorts of ways that she was not communicating with him. She was seeing him as being beyond her. She wasn't seeing herself as an equal. And then Steve highlights how throughout the problems that they had later on of communicating about the differences between their boys, about why one doesn't deserve the bracha, and she was not willing to go and come right out and say that to Yitzchak. That all sorts of ways that the seeds were planted early on of their not building the difficult conversation muscles and not being able to discuss those elephants in the room. And so that's one of the examples of that. Another example also from Bereshis very early on with the founding team of the world, if you will, Very interesting thing. What is the two-word phrase that the Torah captures as the relationship between Adam and Chava, between Ish ve'ishto? What is that phrase that the Torah uses to capture that?
Are you speaking about Ish or Isha? If the Yod, if it's Isha controlling the husband, it's not good? Is that
No.
what-
Okay, so that's one extension that we can go and take a look at the Gemara when it's talking about the Aish that comes out if you don't have that, if Hashem is not between the two of them. Okay, but the
Ezer Kenegdo?
Ezer Kenegdo is being the phrase, that's the key one that they use to be able to take a look at that. What does Rashi say? Bradley, do you remember what Rashi says there? You're a Rashi expert here.
Ezer lo zacha kenegdo.
Okay, terrific. So beat us to the punch. Mr. Saban has it right at his fingertips. Okay, so if you are Zoche, you get the Ezer. What does that say to us? That if we are getting the Kenegdo, it's because we weren't Zoche. What does that say? That it's a failing in us if we're getting pushback, if we're getting critique, if we are getting something negative as the feedback. That's what Rashi says about what Ezer Kenegdo says. So what does that imply for us? That is actually our natural instinct. Rashi is capturing the description of when we get criticism. Does that feel good to us? Do we say thank you for the criticism? No, we recoil from it. We have a negative reaction to it, a reflex against that. What do we have to go and reprogram ourselves to do instead? This is actually back to the Netziv, one of my favorite Perushim. The Netziv says that actually that the Kenegdo is the Ezer. That when we get pushback, that is doing us a favor of being able to see things that we didn't know about ourselves, of being able to see ways that we can improve, of being able to see ways that we can rise to a higher level. And that when we get that pushback, we have to see it differently. But unfortunately, especially when it's someone who's close to us and we're getting criticism, whether it's a boss, whether it is a spouse, it's used in Ezer Kenegdo when it comes to Ish ve'isha, that is capturing a bit of the way in which we have the negative communication that we don't take in the right way. And so we can also see echoes of this in some research that's been done. This is an old professor of mine at Harvard in the PhD program, Richard Hackman, on what's called grumpy orchestras. I don't know if we have musicians out here, but which type of orchestra do you think is going to play better? Orchestras that get along really well, or orchestras that have some grumpiness between them in the interpersonal? Well, actually, it turns out that grumpy orchestras, those who have some kind of creative tension, are willing to surface things and mention it to each other, actually play a little bit better than the ones that are smoothing over things, that are, everyone is lovey-dovey, it's all kumbaya within the orchestra. And we can see some other echoes of that, of the Kenegdo, in every chavrusa that we have. What is the chavrusa dynamic? What is the way in which we have in the base medrash, all of these duos, are they all smoothing over things together? It's actually, I've found two different models of chavrusas. And we can actually see from one of my favorite dapim in Shas. This is the relationship. Who are the most famous two chavrusas that we have across all of Shas?
Hillel and Shammai, no?
No.
So those were Bar
Ben Lakish and
Plukta. Those were,
Yochanan.
what was that?
I see here it's Ben Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan.
Okay, excellent. So I should have put this up first so we could go and quiz people. But this is the most famous of the chavrusa duos that we have across Shas. Interesting thing, we have Rabbi Yochanan also with one of the other, we think it might be a chavrusa with Ilfa, some very interesting things that come out of the story there in Tanis Chav Aleph. But this is from one of my favorite dapim in Shas. This is from Bava Metzia, Pei Daled. Very easy to remember that one, by the way. What is Pei Daled backwards? What does that spell?
Daf.
Daf. Okay, so one of my favorites, favorite dapim in Daf is this. Okay, but it's talking about the relationship between the two of them. Reish Lakish passes his away, and the Gedolim have a great solution. Reb Yochanan is totally blown away by that, totally unable to be consoled. They go and tap Reb Elazar ben Padas as his next chavrusa, and it doesn't work at all. Why is that? We see the two models of the chavrusas. Reb Elazar ben Padas is that Messiahlach, I'm going to support you with everything you say, Rabbi Yochanan. You bring up something and I can tell you why you are right. Very different from Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish was Makshili Esrim Barba Kushiata. You throw 24 darts at me as a chavrusa, Reish Lakish, that is invaluable to me. What are these two models of chavrusa? Which does it sound like? Which one is Rashi?
Which one what?
Which one models Rashi's approach to the Ezer Kenegdo dynamic? This is Rabbi Elazar ben Padas. I'm going to support you.
Rabbi Elazar ben
I am
Padas,
giving you
he did not want him. Rabbi Yochanan אומר לו, I don't need you. I don't need yes men.
Exactly. He was, Rabbi Yochanan was very much the Netziv, saying that when I get pushback, I love it. I am seeing it as a bracha. I am getting better because of it. I'm rising to greater heights. And so it's these two very different things that we have to retrain ourselves. But our natural instinct when we're following our heart is very much to recoil from that negative feedback and to not want to have the kenegdo within it. And so this is a very different perspective, but we can see within the founding teams, family, friends, and things like that, that we have that natural instinct that we are not getting good things when we have tough, difficult discussions, tension-filled ones when we are grumpy. And it actually turns out that we lose when we don't have that kind of a relationship. This is actually something that's done by one of my students at Harvard, Jessica Alter, who captured this about the need for founding teams to develop difficult conversation muscles. And it's the same kind of thing that we can see echoed when we are heading down. We have, as Rabbi Lehrfeld highlighted, I have a daughter who's getting married in a week and a half. This is one of the key lessons that we're going to be talking about how to be able to form that next great Azer Kenegdo relationship. Being able to see how you should be pushing each other to greater heights and being able to have the Kenegdo become a bracha. And so all sorts of ways that we can see echoes in the Torah of what we were talking about within founding teams and some of those challenges. And this was actually the early fisticuffs of being able to fight well that Jessica Alter was bringing up. When I was writing about this, I did a piece for the Wall Street Journal on these perils of founding with friends and family and things like that. This is actually the graphic that they put together for it. Anyone see anything wrong with this graphic?
Yeah, the pieces don't fit with each other.
I thought this is brilliant of them. I don't know if it's intentional at all or anything like that, but they would actually have to be turning their backs on each other in order for the puzzle pieces to be a fitting. But otherwise, this is not compatibility right now. How it is coming out, it captured very well a bunch of the things that we're talking about and a bunch of those dynamics. If we now just go and shift very briefly to the other side of it, we had on the right side the tensions between the family members from Sefer Bereshis. We've been getting to know Moshe and Aaron. Now for the last couple of parshas, we're going to be getting to know them a little bit better as we go through some of these next steps and the other ways that we're going to see how they helped found our nation. And so what are the things that we can see with Moshe and Aaron that maybe have some echoes in this? So first off, if we take a look at these two factors that we were taking a look at before about the likelihood of discussing the elephants in the room, and then also the damage to the startup, the structural solution we might have to be able to limit the damage. This is a very interesting couple of psukim. This is coming from very recently, what we were going and reading in the Parsha. We can go and highlight a couple of the three of the words that recur here. Very interesting things. The pasuk would have been totally complete in a lot of ways if it would have said, "Vayaged Moshe le'Aaron et divrei Hashem," or "the et ha'otot asher tzivahu." Vaydaber Aaron et hadvarim asher diber. The Torah in these two psukim, just a couple of psukim away from each other, recurringly talks about the kol, about the way in which they were talking. They were not hiding the elephants in the room. Moshe was telling Aaron about all of the things that had happened backwards in the other direction. Aaron being able to fill him in about all of the things that are going on in the other direction and being very open about their communication. Very interesting thing that we see about a structural difference that we have with Moshe and Aaron and the way they were approaching it. And then also, were there ways that we had walls, firewalls, if you will, that were built between these two brothers? What kind of walls did Hashem create that were going to have very distinctive things about their different domains?
Well, Hashem very clearly made Moshe the boss. Moshe
Okay,
was
and
the
what did he
boss,
make for? What did he make for Aaron?
and Aaron was his right-hand man, so to speak, his spokesman.
So could Moshe have stepped in and done Aaron's job?
I'm sorry?
Could Moshe have stepped in and done Aaron's job?
No.
No. But Aaron couldn't have known what to do without Moshe.
Okay, but Esther, why were you saying that? Okay, we can get Esther back later. Okay, in terms of the differences between them, we actually have Hillel Cohen Halevi. What was the definitions that we have of the different roles that they were supposed to play?
Hi. I felt that before this pasuk, Vayeged Moshe LaAaron et Kol Divrei, he already implored Hashem to say that he could not speak, he could not get up. So I think, in front of the nation, in front of Paro. So therefore, Hashem said, don't worry, your brother Aaron will. So it was like a symbiotic coexistence kind of a relationship. I think that's the relationship that the two brothers had throughout the Torah. There were times that it was great, and then there were times they each had their roles, but there were times that it didn't work out after the Egel, and different times.
Okay, so clear role definitions about who's going to be speaking when. Okay, and then also
It's
different
more than
lanes
the
that
ro-
they each had.
It's more than the roles. Hashem very clearly, there is a ladder here. There is a structure. And the minute that structure breaks down, you have Maseh Egel. Moshe was above Aharon. They got along, but he was really one rung above him. And
Okay,
when Moshe
was-
disappears, and that rung over him disappears, then Maseh Egel happens.
Okay,
So
was
they
Moshe
were
on the
very
top
clearly
rung?
defined. Their positions
No,
were very clearly defined from the very beginning, and therefore it worked. Hashem defined very clearly what their position vis-a-vis each other is as well. And
Okay,
that's
so that would be
why they
taking the
were-
lesson that we saw from founding teams and seeing how Hashem instilled that. However, I think there's an important nuance that's a little bit different on that. Was Moshe at the top rung of the ladder of Kahuna?
No, but he was at the top
No.
rung of leading Bnei Israel.
Okay, so we have these two very different lanes that Hashem is defining. Aaron, your lane is Kahuna. Moshe does not step in there. The same kind of way that we had the definition of very clear roles of Zev Nagel versus Daniel Nagel, very clear ones for them. Dad in the next room versus Aryeh in the other room, very clear definitions of the line between them. Moshe, yes, the Malchut in charge, all sorts of echoes of Moshe being a Melech and Aaron not being in that vein, but Moshe was not in the Kahuna lane at all. And this is where Hashem structured it to be able to have those very clear definitions between the two of them, seeing some kind of an echo of what we were seeing in the earlier thing with the way in which we can see the structure in the founding teams. One of the key things is the aspirational side. We're going to wrap on this. The key thing is there's also a word that sticks out here. Aaron and Moshe were two people. Why are they being referred to as who? Singular. Well, when you have the clear lane definition, when you have the clear communication, you can have the Achdus emerge. You can have it be the Yechidus, the Vayichan, Tachat Ahar, etc., like the other ways in which you have them coming together because it's been structured to be able to have that Achdus together. That sticks out very much. It's a lot more classical. Heim HaMedabrim, multiple ones who were speaking. However, the Torah goes out of its way to talk about when you have the clear lane definition and the communication of the kol, then we can achieve the Achdus. And also one of the other things that we would aspire to, hopefully within the friends and family teams, but also in all the relationships that we have, v'samach belibo, that despite those differences, or possibly because of those differences, we can have the simcha for each other. We don't have the harming of the relationships that we saw within the founding teams, the souring that comes from the tensions. And hopefully if we can go and be able to learn some of the lessons from the best practices with Moshe and Aaron, and not be able to take be able to have the contrast to the lessons that we saw in Bereshis with all the tensions with the relatives. This is what we can aspire to in our personal lives with our Ezer Kenegdo and all the other ways that we're able to tap these relationships to do things together. So thank you everyone for being so engaged. We went all the way up to the last minute because you had so many thoughts on the things that were going on here. Thank you for taking the time in the middle of the week and for all your very active engagement in this. And thank you, Hatzlacha Rabba, with everything that we have in the new year. And hopefully as we're heading towards, hopefully lots of simchas in each family.
Dr. Wasserman, so we actually want to be the one who thank you for your brilliant and interactive shir. It was really nice. So thank you so much for your time. Also like to thank Rachel Chaifetz, who is part of our education committee, for introducing you and for connecting us with you. So that's a very nice shidduch. So thank you so much. And I also want to take a few minutes, because I know it's late, it's 9:02. I also want to take the opportunity to just save the dates. So if you have an iPhone, iPad, or just a piece of paper and pen, these are the save the dates. So next week, our own Rabbi Learfield will continue with a series Wednesday at 8 p.m. Kabbalat Shabbat Prose and Prayers, which will be part of a 2 to 3 part series. And then we continue our scholar residence. Next month, we'll have Dr. Dida Eisenstadt from Emory, who will be speaking on the following topic: how did Rashi know that the oral Torah is from Sinai? And in March, we have Rabbi Simon de Hollander, who's actually from Holland, so That's interesting. Who will be speaking on Islamic sources that deal with Esther and Haman. So on that note, again, thank you so much, Dr. Wasserman. Mazel tov again to you for the upcoming Chasana. Thank you to each of you for participating tonight. And please spread the word. Please let everyone know, it doesn't have to be a TRM member, that we here at TRM are doing some fascinating, interesting scholar residence. And tonight was an example of the excellence that we offer. So thank you so much again for everyone. And if you have any other ideas for scholar residence, please let us know. Thank you, Rabbi Learfield, as well. And thank you all. Have a good evening. All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wasserman. Be well. Mazel tov again.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Pleasure meeting you.
Speak soon.